This one's interesting, though. Rams and Raiders will trade big names. For Los Angeles, the reason is clear. The Rams have nearly $14 million over the cap and have 6 players with cap hits of $20+ million. 2 of those players, Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford, aren't going anywhere. The other 3, Aaron Donald, quarterback Jalen Ramsey, and pass rusher Leonard Floyd, have cap hits to give LA something to think about. Restructuring a few contracts would get them in a palpable cap position, but after a 5-win season, the Rams could revisit their top-heavy roster philosophy. One AFC personnel director said, Ramsey is one I think the Rams will at least explore moving. He's still a top guy, but the play has fallen off a little bit, and he could use a change of scenery. Ramsey, 28, was the NFL's number 1 corner for 2 consecutive seasons in our summer executive poll. He could have a market. This could impact Detroit. Could Jalen Ramsey be a trade target for Brad Holmes?
I think he could. Yeah, I think when I read that, I absolutely thought of it. Because we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks since the season ended. Where do you want to improve? And obviously, secondary is an area of concern, if not the number 1 and perhaps number 2 area of concern. There's huge concern with that because we don't know how good our corners really are. I mean, Okudah regressed the last few weeks of the season. And in fact, he was benched a couple times, so that was hard to watch. Warrior looks like he's not going to be brought back. And then what do you have? Jerry Jacobs and a couple other guys that I don't know if they're ready for starters, but they're nice role players to have on a team. But are they ready for starting duties? Jalen Ramsey makes all the sense in the world for a team that has the ability to make the playoffs. We're a whisker within making the playoffs. Should have been in the playoffs, but they weren't. But what stopped them is pass defense and defense in general. They need a corner. Jalen Ramsey's great. Have his skills slipped a little bit? Maybe a touch, but he's 28 years old. He's due a lot of money. But when you trade for somebody or whatever, you can always try to rework a contract. And does it make sense for them to give up draft capital to get it done? I think it does.
So when you trade for a player, you're not responsible for their signing bonus. The way signing bonuses work, and with the cap, is let's say you sign a 4-year, $40 million contract, and it's 4 years, 50, but you get a $10 million signing bonus, which means you get $10 million up front, and then you're making $10 million per season. The way it works on the cap is, so it's 4 years, $10 million counts against the cap, plus 1 quarter, 4 years, 1 quarter of the $10 million signing bonus. So you're a $12.5 million hit. When you trade that player, the remaining signing bonus gets accelerated, and that you have to pay that right away. So the team that's trading for him isn't responsible for the signing bonus. Jalen Ramsey next year, if Detroit traded for him, would make $17 million. He'd count $17 million against the cap. Next year, he'd cost $14.5 million against the cap. So 23, $17 million. 24, $14.5. And 25, $15.5. I'd do that for Jalen Ramsey. I'd take on that cap. But the question is, he is entering that time. He's not there yet, but you get north of 30, and corner's skill set typically deteriorates. But Detroit would have him for his 29-year-old playing season, his 30-year-old playing season, and his 31-year-old playing season. So we can talk about whether this is bold ass, but this is an executive suggesting that Jalen Ramsey will get traded from the Rams. I think Detroit should have interest in this.
I think they should have a ton of interest in it, and I would. Now the question is, what do you give up to get him? What would it take? If I'm the Rams, you're asking for a first-round pick at the very least.
Yeah, and I think...
Would you give up the 18th pick?
I think I would, yeah.
I wouldn't give up the 6th.
I wouldn't give up the 6th.
I'd be willing to give up 18 because I know he's good. All right, I know he's one of the best in the game. I don't know who I'm drafting at 18 if they're going to live up to the hype.
Now,
how good they're going to be. They may have a high ceiling, and they should have a high ceiling. But is their high ceiling? Is it Jalen Ramsey?
And this matters. I mean, how much it matters, I'm not sure. But it does matter. Brad Holmes, Les Snead, the GM of the Rams, They know each other well.
Right.
And Brad Holmes has some insight on Jalen Ramsey. So, I'm comfortable with this. I'm comfortable. This is really something that would be under consideration.
But now the question becomes, how much more than the 18th overall pick is it going to take?
Yeah,
to
that's a good question.
And if there's another team that's interested, if you're Seattle, well, I guess trading within the division is probably going to be tough. Maybe that wouldn't happen. I was just thinking right away, a team that's good that's going to have a higher draft pick or move higher up, would they be more inclined to do that? Would the Packers do it?
Right.
Would some other team that's close that could definitely use him, with their pick that's higher, would that be better for them?